else had ever made connections before in his field of study. Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I have heard that exact thing said about Professor Einstein, is that he was able to link theories together or jump, given the information that everyone had, he was able to create the theories well in advance of anybody else in his time that were not even thinking like that. So that is interesting that it could be reflected in his handprint.
So here's another really interesting thing about Albert Einstein's hands. He has a line that indicates a need for, I'll just call it escape.
Oh.
Yeah, and we call it a via lascivia, and it's in old style, gypsy palmistry. They called it the road to ruin. If you weren't following the straight and narrow path, you sort of went your own way, you could end up, in a bad place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the old style palmistry. But again, Richard's system looks at the full spectrum of experience around any given marker. So the full spectrum is this ability to go outside of norm, to go outside of what's expected of you, and to explore, right? So we could call that escaping. So maybe on one extreme, if you're looking at that teeter-totter model that I talked about before, that's one end of it. But at the other end of that model, maybe there's new things to discover there. And it doesn't have to be a negative thing. There's just as much positive potential as negative in any of the markings of the hands. So I find it really interesting that, and Pamela uses the mythology of Icarus, who, if you're familiar at all with mythology, he was the son of Daedalus, who created a method for flying.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and he put together these wings, and he used wax and feathers and different things, and he gave them to his son Icarus, and he said, "You can fly with these wings, but there's a couple of cautions. Don't fly too high, or you'll get too close to the sun, and the wax will melt, and you will fall.
Right.
And don't fly too low, right? Because then you'll be too close to the water, and the feathers will get heavy and waterlogged, and you'll also, you'll fall to the earth that way as well. So you don't stay too high or too low, but I want you to fly."
Wow.
So thanks, Pamela, for that, that awesome story that she gave us to illustrate what the via lascivia can mean in somebody's hands. And I wonder about Albert Einstein. He flew in his exploration of relativity and, all of the discoveries that he made and the theories that he developed and the work that he did. And I wonder about, in his personal life, did he stay in the middle? Did he fly too high sometimes and get burned? Did he fly too low and sink? I wonder how that played out for him, because I know from looking at his hands that energy was present in his life in some way. So maybe it showed up in his relationships.
Yes.
Maybe he was a little too extreme in his teaching. Maybe he was a little too vocal sometimes and got shut down. Maybe he flew under the radar at other times. And maybe there's some other great theory he created that he never put out there that we don't have today because he was flying a little too low.
Yeah. That Icarus analogy is just great. I love it because of this one fact that I remember Albert Einstein was famous for. He actually came up with the idea that you could potentially approach the speed of light, but as you did, your aging slowed down. So the idea is almost Icarus-ness. It's the idea that you can fly. You can go the speed of light, But if you do, there are consequences to that. If you come back to Earth and you've only aged, 10 years, everyone else on the planet might be dead that you know about. Oh, that's fascinating.
Well, he's not here to answer my questions, so he doesn't need my coaching. But I wonder if I could have helped him if he had some problems with flying too high or flying under the radar. If I couldn't have coached him just a little bit, maybe helped him out with that.
I'm sure you could have. Matter of fact, another famous quote from Albert Einstein that I really enjoyed was someone commented to him one time, with his crazy flyaway hair that he always used to wear, and he didn't care about combing it. They also looked at his shoes, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Einstein, you have 2 different colored socks on." And he said, "At my age, I can afford not to wear socks if I don't want to." There you go.
Definitely flying free there in his sock choice.
I think so, yes. Wow, that's fascinating stuff. And you do have maybe one more you want to talk about?
Yeah, you bet. Let's see. I've got a few presidents. It's interesting, they're all warriors.
Oh.
Every last one of them that I printed out, they all are warriors, which makes sense for someone with so much responsibility on his shoulders.
Yes.
But I do wonder about how they dealt with their worry. Hopefully they did a better job than my grandmother did with her worry fingerprints. But I will talk a little bit about George Clooney.
Oh.
One of my faves. And I've got some nice close-ups here that Pamela Landers sent to me. And he has a heart line that's sort of zigzaggy. And I suppose you can imagine, based on just the little that we've talked about with heart lines, what that might mean in someone's emotional life.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that might mean? He's got a zigzaggy heart line.
I would think that that would be maybe running hot and running cold with relationships, possibly.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense for this heart line. Am I spontaneous or am I a nurturer? Do I want to be alone? Do I want to be with other people? Mm-hmm. Which is right? Which is wrong? What's home for me? What is my go-to emotional style? Am I a happy-go-lucky fun guy, the center of attention? Or, am I the hermit that just wants to be at home, alone, like Bob Hope after the show? But he's also got a very interesting headline, and it's very long, and it's very curved, and it goes way down to the bottom of the hand, and headline is thinking style. And George Clooney has what we call a Persephone headline. And for those mythology buffs, they might know what that means just by saying that word Persephone or that name. But most people don't know who Persephone was. She was a guide to lost souls in the underworld.
Oh, my goodness.
And she had a very tragic story, but it ended up at the end that she ended up spending half of her time on the earth where flowers bloomed wherever she stepped, and she was very spring-like. And then she spent the other half of her time in the winter in the underworld, which is very dark, and people get lost down there. And they're bumping into walls, and they don't know which way to go. And what Persephone did is bring light, bring the spring down to the underworld.
Oh, my goodness.
People with this kind of headline have this talent for or capacity for helping others in a very powerful way. Not by fixing anything, not by necessarily healing, but by bringing light to a dark place.
Yes. That is fascinating, and I'll tell you why. The little that I know about certain celebrities is kind of interesting. And, George Clooney was in this fascinating movie called Men Who Stare at Goats. It was a great movie because it was about the remote viewing program that was funded by the Army, the U.S. Army, to how to try to train psychic spies during the Cold War era. Great movie, but George's character in that movie, he claimed he was a Jedi Knight. The idea being that the Jedis are there to fight the dark forces, and to maybe bring light to the world. And I've always heard that some actors, many actors, basically end up acting themselves out in their parts. They go to the core of whoever they are and bring that forth into the film or the project they're working on. So that just hit me big time when you said that.
Well, again, George isn't here to answer my questions, and he hasn't signed up for any coaching sessions with me. But I certainly would ask him about his experiences around this and see, where is he on the teeter-totter with this one? Because again, as Pamela says, there's a master path and a student path to every marker in the hands and every aspect of our life. So there's some things to watch out for with Persephone, and then there's some things to celebrate. And I hope that he's doing more celebrating than watching out.
Yes, and it would be interesting to find out how his handprints have progressed over the years as well, just like you were mentioning with those kind of folks that can do that more than once with you. But there's a few things that I wanted to make sure that I asked you about before we get off the air here. We've got about 20 minutes left, so this is a good time to get down to some of the really fun things that I thought about. What if, for instance, you were able to get the print of a non-human, let's say initially an animal, like a dog, like a cat, or even a monkey, a simian. Would that have any information that would correlate to what you are studying?
Well, that's a really good question. Probably with the monkey, because we're so closely related. But the whole physiology of a paw is different than our hands. We did have a dog for several years, and I did look at his paws a few times to see if there was anything I could glean. And I just don't know I don't know the wiring.
Yeah.
I don't know the wiring. I know that there's a connection between brain and hands, and that the patterns in the brain show up in the patterns in the hands. But I don't know how that works with animals. I do know, however, that tapping works with animals.
Oh, really?
So there is correlation with the energy points or acupoints on the body. In EFT tapping, we tap on the top of the head, for example. That's one of the spots. And so I used to tap on my dog's head on the 4th of July when he would get afraid because the fireworks were going off. And he would be just shivering, and I would go sit with him, and I would tap on the points, what I guessed were the corresponding points on his body from my body. Mm-hmm. And so I tapped on his points, and he calmed down and stopped shivering every time. Oh, my goodness.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And how long does that, kind of procedure last for your dog? Would it kind of get him through the whole night? Do you have to do it more than once during the process?
Yeah, I had to repeat. I had to repeat it for him because I wasn't able to go back to the original event with him and tap. He got locked outside of the house one day, and everyone left, and then there was a rain and thunderstorm.
Oh, my goodness.
He was terrified, and he ended up several blocks away, about a half a mile away, at someone else's house, and they called